Here is Clemson through the eyes of the Tiger.
Our first Tiger was Steve Morrison. Steve was the number one Tiger during the 1960-61 academic year. Steve earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering in 1963. Steve lived in Myrtle Beach. His hometown was Hartsfield, South Carolina. Steve passed away in 2017. I followed my roommate, Bill McCown, who was the Tiger the previous year. During my year as the Tiger, McCown was the cannoneer. That's a military term to define a soldier who fires artillery in support of infantry. And by the end of my senior year, I had been the Tiger, the cannoneer, and the head cheerleader. The greatest feeling I had being the Tiger was at the historic first game against South Carolina to be played at Clemson. During that game, Bill fired the cannon toward an intoxicated South Carolina fan, and the pressure from the blank shell caused the fan to lose his hat as he fell backwards. Like this fan, the Gamecocks fell too to the Tigers in Memorial Stadium that day. Final score, Clemson 12, South Carolina 2. Since this first historic win in Death Valley, Memorial Stadium's nickname since 1948, the Tigers are 19-10-1 at home and 19-11 at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia going into the 2020 season against their in-state rival. It's very sad to announce that we lost a member of the Clemson family when Jim Lloyd passed away during the writing of this book in 2015. Jim was looking forward to submitting his stories about his experiences as the Tiger after a vacation with his wife, Karen. Jim Lloyd was the number one Tiger during the 1961-62 academic year. Jim earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Education in 1962. Jim lived in Alexandria, Virginia. His hometown was Edgefield, South Carolina.
Our third Tiger in the 60s was Robert Bob Trogdon. Bob was the number one Tiger during the 1962-63 academic year. Bob earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in English in 1963. His hometown, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Here is Bob's story. Like most mascots during the early years, I was allowed to climb up on the crossbar of the goalpost prior to the game. Then we climbed again during the game when the Tigers were headed in the opposite direction of where we were sitting. Having a high school gymnastics background definitely gave me an advantage with this antic. Today, I look at the collapsible goalpost in Death Valley, and I think how much easier it would be to get up on the crossbar if I stood on it as they raced it back into place before a game. Technology is great, however, rule changes have taken the fun out of the game for the current mascots. The last two games of the 1962 season were very memorable. The first unforgettable memory was at the University of Maryland, located in College Park, Maryland. Whenever Clemson travels to Maryland, it's customary to visit the historic sites of Washington. Everyone knows how college students like to sleep in, and tourist sites are not high on their list. Several of us thought it was more important to sleep than to visit the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, in the White House. A year later, when President Kennedy was assassinated, I realized that choosing to sleep was a mistake on my part. The next day, I was walking into Byrd Stadium on the Maryland campus, holding the Tiger head in my hands. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by Maryland students trying to steal the head. On this day, they never got the head because some of the Clemson football players came to my rescue. And final score that day was Clemson 17, Maryland 14. A week later, South Carolina came to Tigertown for the season finale. Many families in the state of South Carolina are split, with half the family cheering for the Gamecocks and the other half for the Tigers. On this afternoon, two Spartanburg natives were on the opposite side of the field as mascots. Bobby Dowdswell was Cocky, and I was the Tiger. With 1:42 remaining in the game, Rodney Rogers kicked the winning field goal for the Tigers. It was the second week in a row that Rodney had won the game. The previous week, he accomplished the feat with 1:24 remaining. Final score that day was Clemson 20, South Carolina 17. On Sunday afternoon prior to the beginning of football season, I went on a blind date with Mary Petrie Stewart from Converse College. and it was love at first sight. When you've met the girl of your dreams, what do? You invite her to all your home football games. Then, as the mascot, you take off during the middle of the game through the crowd to see her sitting in the stands. And after raising your headgear, you get that little kiss that helps you endure the heat of wearing that headgear throughout the remainder of the game. I'm happy to say that Mary and I have been married since 1965. We have 2 children and 5 grandchildren. After a year as the Tiger, I was the cannoneer the next year. Although you're a lot more comfortable out of the suit, you still have to worry about the opposing fans. While attending a game at Duke, members of one of their fraternities took the cannon. It was returned after they had painted it blue with a Blue Devil design on the front of the dolly, the cart with wheels on it which the cannon is mounted for easy transportation. And the final score that day was Duke 35, Clemson 30. Our next Tiger was Jim Gibson. Jim was the number 1 Tiger during the 1963-64 academic year. Jim earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in history in 1965 and a Juris Doctor degree in 1968 from the University of Georgia. His hometown, Sumter, South Carolina. Here is Jim's story. I need to say thank you to Tommy Page, who was the head cheerleader. He asked, and I agreed to become the next Tiger. The suit was a cheap costume made out of cloth, nothing like today's suit. Unlike the change made to the location of the Clemson, South Carolina game, which is now alternated between schools, we played Georgia Tech at historic Grant Field in Atlanta until 1974. On this day, the historic field was ankle-deep in water. What a mess! Final score that day was number 9 Georgia Tech 27, Clemson nothing. 2 weeks later, it was 84 degrees in Clemson when the Georgia Bulldogs visited Death Valley. Unfortunately, there was a sudden cold snap during the first half of the game. As the temperature plunged to 57 degrees, it began to rain, and then the rain turned to golf ball-size hail, which covered the field. Fans began to panic as they raced for protection under the stands. The second half was delayed for 30 minutes due to the weather conditions. Well, today, weather technology allows game management officials enough time to warn fans to proceed to a safe location away from lightning, heavy rain, or like that day, big hail. Final score, Clemson 7, Georgia 7. On Friday, November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated, prompting the rescheduling of our football game against South Carolina. The next week, who could forget that picture of John Kennedy, Jr. standing next to his older sister Caroline, saluting his father's casket as it was carried by a horse-drawn caisson to Arlington Cemetery. 3 days later, we played South Carolina. It was the only time the 2 rivals have battled each other on Thanksgiving Day. Final score, Clemson 24, South Carolina 20. Not many students had cars, so in front of the old library, now Sykes Hall, there was an area known as the bumming line. One sign read Greenville, the other Columbia. Thumbing a ride home was easy. Now returning was a different story. There was an unwritten code that if you found a ride back, you would share it with fellow students. Dr. R.C. Edwards was considered to be one of Clemson's most popular presidents, serving from 1958 to 1979. One Saturday when I was home in Sumter, Dr. Edwards called the house. He and Dean Ken Vickery, for whom Vickery Hall is named, the controller, would be returning to Clemson on Sunday after a meeting in Sumter. We were familiar with each other because his 2-year-old granddaughter, Laura Reid, was always around me at the football pep rallies. To say I was surprised was an understatement. When I hung up the phone, my father asked who had called, and I said, "Dr. Edwards." My father said, "I don't need any of your smart answers." Well, he, like 2 of my friends who thought it was a joke, finally believed me when Dr. Edwards picked us up the next day. During my year as the Tiger, I was dating my future wife, Louise Wheezy Williman, daughter of Gene Williman. Gene was the business manager for Clemson Athletics and the executive secretary of IPTAY. IPTAY, which stood for I Pay 10 a Year, is an organization founded in 1934 to raise money for student-athlete scholarships by having the members donate $10 per year. Jerry Burton was the Tiger who wasn't a number one Tiger in 1963. Jerry earned a Bachelor of Science degree in textile management. His hometown, Calhoun Falls, South Carolina. Here is his story on how he wasn't the Tiger. In 1963, I went to the movie theater in downtown Clemson to watch Four for Texas. It was a movie featuring the breathtaking Ursula Andress, Dean Martin, and Frank Sinatra. Today, the movie theater is the Tiger's Sport Shop. My wristwatch stopped during the movie, so I missed my 4 o'clock cheerleading group picture for Taps. When the yearbook came out, I was listed as being the Tiger in the picture, even though I never had my picture taken. After graduation, I was away from home serving in the U.S. Army. While away, my mom had looked through the 1964 Taps and told all her family and friends that I was the Tiger. Upon returning home, I remembered one day being with some friends and my sister, Kathy. Kathy was telling them that I was the Tiger when I was in college. I told her and the group it was a mistake and how I missed the group picture. Kathy was proud of her brother and said, "Yes, you were. Mom said that you were." Well, I guess I should have agreed because I had printed proof it was in Taps. Midway through the 60s, Marvin Poag Reid became the number one Tiger during the 1965-66 academic year. Poag earned a Bachelor of Science degree in pre-professional studies in 1968 and a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree in 1971 from the University of Georgia. His hometown, Rock Hill, South Carolina. Here is Poag's story. In 1965, we defeated North Carolina State 21-7 and Virginia 20-14 to open the season. Our third game would be the first Saturday in October when the Fighting Tigers visited Atlanta to play the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. The week leading up to the game, I'd been working on a stunt at night in Death Valley. During the game, I was hoisted onto the crossbar of the goalpost by the cheerleaders. And before you knew it, there I was, walking across the horizontal bar. I made it all the way across without falling. It was well known that Georgia Tech fraternity pledges had a bounty on my tiger tail. After the game, I was chased by the pledges, but I beat them to the dressing room and the safety of our football players. I had been given a heads-up by a Tech cheerleader, so I knew I needed to get off the field quickly. On Monday after the game, I had a note in my mailbox from Dean Walter Cox, and the note threatened me to within an inch of my life if I ever did that stunt again. So it was the one and only time I was on that crossbar. Final score, Georgia Tech 38, Clemson 6. Our next Tiger was the tallest ever Tiger. John Zeke Welborn was the number one Tiger during the 1966-67 academic year. Zeke earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering in 1966. His hometown, 96, South Carolina. Here is his story. Hollywood came to Winston-Salem, North Carolina for Wake Forest 1964 homecoming game against Clemson, and I was the substitute Tiger. Wake Forest had a pregame parade on Saturday morning, and riding in a Mercedes-Benz convertible was the legendary actress Jane Mansfield. If you've never heard of her, I suggest you Google her. She had the beauty of Marilyn Monroe, and it was only fitting for me to do a meet and greet. Well, this Tiger did everything he could to get inside that convertible. However, she did everything she could to keep me out. As much as I would like to say I was sitting next to her as her leading man in the parade, well, the fairy tale with the beautiful actress never came to fruition. My attempt, though, has become a legendary story that is told on a regular basis during football season. Final score that day, Clemson 21, Wake Forest 2. In 1966, I dressed before the football games in the newly renamed Fike or Clemson Fieldhouse and signed autographs as I walked toward Memorial Stadium. The Tigers were the defending ACC champions. Excitement was high on campus as the Tigers opened the season with a 40-35 win over the Virginia Cavaliers. Even more exciting was when the student body tried to pass my 6-foot 8-inch frame up the stands during the season. Week 2 of the football season saw the Tigers head to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. Coach Howard was a huge figure on campus, and getting to be near him was pure pleasure. Prior to the game, I had the opportunity to listen to his pregame speech to the team. It was legendary, just like our head coach. However, as motivational and funny as it was, the censors won't let me write about it. Catch up with me in Greenwood if you want to hear the story. The Tigers lost to the nationally ranked Yellow Jackets on that Saturday. At year's end, the Tigers had leaped over the Jackets in the conference standings to win their second consecutive ACC championship. Final score that day was number 9 Georgia Tech 13 and Clemson 12. Once again, it's sad to announce the passing of another Tiger. Robert Possum Harris was the number 1 Tiger during the 1967-68 academic year. Possum earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering in 1968 and a Master of Business Administration degree in 1986 from the University of Richmond. His hometown, Atlanta. Here is Possum's story prior to his passing in 2016. My first game in the suit was in 1967 when the Tigers hosted Wake Forest. John Inslin, a cheerleader, helped me get up on the crossbar of the goalpost. There I was, standing proud in front of 36,000 fans, when whap, zing, someone hit me in the leg with a rock. Well, I didn't last very long up there after getting hit. I got down and prowled the sidelines for the rest of the game as the Tigers won their 4th consecutive home opener. Final score, Clemson 23, Wake Forest 6. From 1954 to 1972, Clemson had a student dress up and be known as the Country Gentleman. Butch Roach was the Country Gentleman in 1967. He carried a cane and pushed around a cannon with 10-gauge shells. I told Butch that even though the cannon fired blank shells, it could still be dangerous if pointed at someone. I was standing next to Butch for the opening kickoff to the game, and that was a huge mistake. He shot me in the rear. I felt the combustion of the air hitting my suit, plus I couldn't hear for 2 days. It was the last time I stood next to or in front of Butch and that cannon. In Week 2, we were playing Georgia in Death Valley. I had gone to Athens High School in Athens, Georgia, so I was psyched for this game. During halftime, as I looked out at the University of Georgia band, I saw one of my high school girlfriends waving a flag. Well, I slowly crept up on her, grabbed her, and laid her back in a big embrace. You know, that same embrace that you saw growing up watching our military returning home to a hero's welcome in Times Square in the 1940s? Yeah, it was one of those. Well, she nearly killed me with a flagpole. But it was worth it. Final score, number 5, Georgia 24, Clemson 17. During the year, Goody Thomas of Rock Hill provided a car for the cheerleaders to use during the team's entrance, similar to the car used at Georgia Tech today. Goody's son, Craig, or better known as Zero, was a member of the freshman cheerleading squad. On this hot afternoon, I was on top of the car with my elbows resting on the crossbar of the goalpost. Well, a few seconds later, the cannon fired and the car shot out from under me. I was left hanging for the next few minutes until all of the players had passed under me. My buddies, including Jimmy Addison, the star quarterback, tugged on my tail for good luck. Addison had been named the National Player of the Week for his performance in a 40-35 win over Virginia the previous year. Later that afternoon, I walked off the field having signed more autographs than Addison. Going into the 4th game of the season, we were 1-2 and playing at Auburn, where they had a live eagle as a mascot. Their handlers asked that I hold the war eagle for a photo. Well, I couldn't act afraid with that big bird on my arm, but I tell you, I was scared to death. At day's end, it was our 3rd consecutive loss. Final score that day, Auburn 43, Clemson 21. It was the 7th game of the season, and we were undefeated in conference play with a 2-0 record. We were at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the dumbest thing I ever did was about to happen. Like any other male, I always tried to impress the ladies, especially from another school. I started talking to a female North Carolina cheerleader. The next thing I knew, I was standing there minus the tiger head. She had tossed it into the North Carolina stands. Well, what could my fellow cheerleaders and I do to get the head back? The answer was simple. We kidnapped their mascot, a live goat. And a couple of minutes later, we met at midfield and made the trade. That was the last time I ever let anyone hold the head. Final score, Clemson 17, North Carolina nothing. It was a tradition for us to go over and meet the other team's cheerleaders. This game was at home against North Carolina State. I carried a toilet plunger, and my tail had a weight in it which caused it to fly up between my legs when I ran too hard. The Wolf, Mr. Wolf, came up to me with his New Jersey accent and told me he knew karate. I told him that if he tried to karate me, I'd hit him with my plunger. At halftime, some North Carolina State fans ran onto the field with a big banner that was derogatory towards Clemson. It was high school senior day, and the boys in their best Sunday suits were allowed to sit down on the field. I hollered, "We ain't gonna take that. Get 'em!" And the bleachers emptied. I caught Mr. Wolf out of the corner of my eye coming towards me. A high school player got to him first and hit him right below the knees to flip him in the air. He got up on all fours in time for the country gentleman to hit him in the snout, knocking his head off. 2 more blows to the back of his real head with the country gentleman's cane, and the confrontation was over. Final score, Clemson 14, number 10th-ranked North Carolina State 6. Being the Tiger was dangerous back in the old days. Regardless, I hope the rest of my fellow mascots had as good a time as I did. I still get introduced as the Clemson Tiger, and everybody thinks it was a great honor. I don't tell them any different. Our next Tiger was Robert C. Bob Dotson. Bob was the number 1 Tiger during the 1968-69 academic year. Bob earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Construction Science in 1971. His hometown, Atlanta, Georgia. Here is Bob's story. We all talk about how hot it is wearing the suit. After your first appearance, you look for ways to stay cool. There were no dry-fit clothes that the students wear today to absorb your sweat back then. There was no cooling system under the headgear, nothing. My solution, like other Tigers, was to remove my T-shirt and gym shorts, leaving just my skivvies on. Tuscaloosa, Alabama is the home of the University of Alabama. They're very proud of their marching band. As the band took the field, the announcer, in loud boxing match style of cadence, announced, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the University of Alabama's $1 million Crimson Tide Marching Band," which of course was greeted with a standing ovation and cheering from the capacity crowd. Anyway, their band was huge. When they finally got onto the field for their halftime performance, I was watching, and it struck me that they might need some help. Understand that, like all of the cheerleading squad, I had indulged in a few adult beverages prior to the game. I had gotten into the habit of carrying around on the field my bathroom plunger. Yeah, that stick with the rubber thing on the end that you used to unclog drains. Well, I decided to take the field with the band, plunger in hand, and proceeded to weave myself in and out of their formations a few times, directing the cadence with my bathroom plunger held high. Well, I'm not sure, but I think there were a few boos from the stands. But I didn't stay long, so it was probably not about me, although I thought at the time that my performance enhanced their halftime precision. Anyway, the following Monday I was asked to visit the Dean of Men's office. He told me that the president of the University of Alabama had given him a call and reported that I had disrupted their halftime performance. I was told that when we traveled, the Tiger was a symbol of the university, and that the university expected such to behave with courtesy, dignity, and respect, and that I was to conduct myself like a fine Clemson gentleman. I thought that's what I did, but since the admonition was coupled with a threat of expulsion from the school, I pulled my forelock, apologized, bowed, and said it would never happen again. Final score that day was Alabama 21, Clemson 14. In 1967, Mr. Wolf, the North Carolina State mascot, was at the center of the field at Clemson. I think before the game, but it might have been at halftime. Well, he had his back to the Clemson sideline. A large number of Clemson students leaped the wall and attacked Mr. Wolf from behind, throwing him to the ground and tearing his tail. When the next year was upon us, I heard rumors that when the Tiger got to North Carolina State, the State fans were going to get their revenge. On the way to the game, a supporter of North Carolina State tried to wrestle the Tiger head from me. A struggle ensued, and I ended up punching the guy to the ground. I was surprised that no complaint was lodged. That's the first, someone not complaining about what a mascot had done. I tried to stay as close to the team as possible that day. Prior to the game, the television announcers were introducing the players, who were running to the camera, stopping, being announced, and then running off. The players ran to the camera from a position under one of the goalposts. Next, you see Mr. Wolf begin to climb the goalpost and stand on the crossbar. The head cheerleader for our squad saw him climbing and grabbed me and said, "Hey, you can't let Mr. Wolf outdo the Tiger." So up I went. I wasn't sure at the time how high that crossbar was, but it was not easy to shimmy up that pole in a Tiger outfit. As I tried to climb, Mr. Wolf got to the crossbar first and began shaking the goalpost. He nearly shook me free from my grasp a number of times as I climbed, so that made the climb that much higher and harder. By the time I got upright on the crossbar, if I could have walked across it to the other side, Mr. Wolf would have gotten another thrashing. Anyway, the television cameras got the players' introduction with mascots in the background. Final score that day, Clemson 24, North Carolina State 19. Doug Pridgeon was the freshman Tiger during the 1968-69 academic year. Doug earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology in 1972 from Wofford College. His hometown, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Here is his story. The freshman football team played their games on Thursdays in Memorial Stadium with less than 10,000 people in attendance. The exception was the one time we played Duke in the rain at the current historic Riggs Field, Dr. I.M. Ibrahim Soccer Stadium. The pep rallies on Friday nights prior to Saturday's football games ended with the male cheerleaders and me as the Tiger getting thrown into the library pool if the freshman students, known as rats, could catch us. One pep rally grew into a panty raid and a rat riot with dumpsters in downtown Clemson being lit on fire. City and campus police had to come and break it up. Meanwhile, freshman male students were climbing up on the ledges of Manning Hall to begin their panty raid. Not to be outdone, the freshman girls reciprocated by holding a jockstrap raid on the Tin Cans, Johnstone Hall dormitory, shortly thereafter. Some of the games lacked action, giving us not enough to cheer about, so we persuaded the cannoneer to shoot the cannon after a good tackle. It quickly ended with a severe tongue-lashing by the coaches and the referees. Although I finished my education at Wofford College, Clemson and being the freshman Tiger will always hold a special place in my heart. Go Tigers! The final Tiger during the 60s was Sam Coker. Sam was the number one Tiger during the 1969-70 academic year. Sam earned a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry in 1972. His hometown, Greenville, South Carolina. Here is his story. There was a freshman and a varsity Tiger in the 1960s. I was the freshman mascot in 1967. I worked the freshman football games and assisted the varsity Tiger, Bob Possum Harris. He allowed me to work 2 pep rallies that year. The highlight of the year was being the varsity Tiger for a home game against Alabama and Coach Paul Bear Bryant. The game was held in Memorial Stadium in front of the largest crowd, 49,500 ever at that time in Death Valley. The Alabama quarterback was Ken Stabler, who later became known as the Snake. Final score, Alabama 13, Clemson 10. After several expansions in 1978 and 1983, Memorial Stadium's official attendance increased to 81,500. This mark has been exceeded more than 70 times, with the largest crowd, 86,092, for Bowden Bowl 1 on October 23, 1999. What is interesting about the Memorial Stadium of today is that it's the 16th largest on-campus stadium in the country, second only to Florida State's Doak Campbell Stadium, 82,300 in the ACC. Not bad for a community of approximately 14,000 residents. There's something in these hills to be able to fill the stadium on football Saturdays. Due to academic problems, I decided not to try out to be the Tiger the next year. After getting my academics back in order, I was back in the suit for the 1969 football season. One of my questions during the interview process of the tryout was how I would help with crowd control and keep events peaceful. My thought was, why do you need a mascot if you want everything to be peaceful? Mascots are motivators, playful characters who interact with and encourage the fans to make noise for their respective team. In the early years, it was interesting at games because visiting fans always wanted to remove my head or take my tail. Every football season has special memories. The game against Georgia Tech hadn't even started when I saw a Georgia Tech band member place a Clemson football in his tuba. I walked over to the tuba player, placed my arm inside his instrument, and retrieved our game ball. Later that day, the Tigers would get that elusive win on the road. It was Clemson's first win at Georgia Tech since 1945. Final score, Clemson 21, Georgia Tech 10. We did not know that the South Carolina game would be Coach Frank Howard's final game prior to his retirement. Coach Howard had prowled the Clemson sideline since 1940. His teams had 165 wins, including an undefeated 11-0 season in 1948, 7 outright conference titles, 1 co-championship conference title, and 6 bowl trips. Near the end of the South Carolina game, the country gentleman, Jim Douglas, class of 1970, and I held up a sign at Carolina Stadium wishing South Carolina good luck in the Peach Bowl. In his post-game press conference, the then South Carolina head coach Paul Dotson appreciated our act of good sportsmanship. Final score that day, South Carolina 27, Clemson 13.